Good morning.
Good morning.
Welcome to our worship service. So glad you could join us this morning on this fifth Sunday of the month, and it's a joy to have a fifth Sunday because it means the choir is going to sing, and so we're very glad to have the choir with us this morning. And thanks to Phil for being our worship leader, doing double duty as worship leader and choral member, and we're all so glad that you could be here with us. A little bit later in the worship service, we'll have time for joys and concerns to lift up in prayer. But also we have a stewardship moment, and we're very fortunate this morning. Chris Frazier, one of our beloved longtime members, is going to be giving the stewardship message. Now, sometimes it's hard, a little difficult to understand Chris, so he has written his stewardship message, and I did a little bit of camera work to have some images of Chris, and Brett put it all together with music from the choir, and Craig Model, who's a good friend of Chris's, helped Chris kind of put this together. But it's a collaborative effort, but it is Chris's message, and we're so glad that Chris was willing to help us out with this in this stewardship season. So I'm really looking forward to having all of you see that. It's great. Also, a couple of announcements. This is an official, so right now we're official, call to the fall congregational meeting. November 13th is by the constitution of our church. We have a fall congregational meeting in which the budget for 2023 is presented to the congregation. Now, we don't vote on the budget at this point, but the budget will be presented. And we're doing it a little differently this year. So on November 13th, you come to the 10 o'clock worship service. The service will be just slightly amended. We may skip a couple verses of a couple of hymns. And I promised to preach a if not shorter, at least slightly. I won't go on and on and on. Message in which we can kind of bring the service to a close and then go right into the meeting. So we're not going to go downstairs or take a break in between. We're just going to do it right away so that we can call the meeting to order, get the budget out to everybody, answer any questions that folks have, and then go on with the rest of our day. So we do hope that you'll be there for that and be a part of that meeting. We are a congregational church, after all. These congregational meetings are the kind of what sets us apart from other groups of Christians out there, the fact that we don't make any decisions unless the congregation votes on it. And the congregational system doesn't work if the congregation doesn't show up. So we do hope that you'll be here on the 13th. On the 6th, so next Sunday is All Saints Sunday. So during the worship service, we will be lifting up the names of friends and family who have died over the past 12 months. If you would like, we would love you to call into the church office. If you would like to submit a name of a friend or family member, and we will list it in the bulletin. But if you're not able to, just come on Sunday and you can lift that person up, and we will all lift prayers for the saints on November 6th. Following the worship service, there is going to be a soup and salad luncheon. And we do encourage everybody to stick around after the worship service for a soup and salad luncheon immediately following the 10 o'clock service. The church school is doing a food pantry drive. They're looking for cans of fruit, cans of pasta, or hearty soup. So those three items. Of course, any items that you bring would be welcome. But those are, when we talked to the food pantry, those were the three things that they were looking for the most. What else? I think I've got everything. There's a little article in there about Reformation. This is Reformation Sunday. You'll also see, as part of our stewardship program, bulletin insert with our theme, Beloved, as part of the bulletin, and a little message about stewardship and giving in the church. This week, there's going to be an all-church mailing sent out, which will have all of the materials for the stewardship season, including information about the reasons for stewardship, as well as pledge cards and a number of different ways that you can make a pledge for the 2023 season. So I think that's all that I have right now. But let's continue our worship with our choral intro.
Would all those who are able please stand for the call to worship? The loving one is our constant help, therefore we are not afraid.
Not to shame, the sea roars, and the world began mountain changes, but God's love is steadfast and firm.
In stillness we know the love of God. Here a stream of gladness flows, bringing love into our midst.
The world outside is uncertain, nations war, and leaders fall from grace. But God's love is steadfast and forever.
In stillness we know the love of God. Come and see the work of God, who brings peace to the people of earth.
In God's name, war comes to an end, and the weapons of war are silenced. Truly, God's love is steadfast and forever.
In stillness we know the love of God. Let us worship God together. Our opening hymn is number 439 in the New Century Hymnal, A Mighty Fortress is Our God. Let us lift together the prayer printed in the bulletin, our prayer of invocation. Still our hearts, O God. Make us aware of your loving presence. Open our hearts to your teachings, that your ways might become our ways in every moment of our lives and with every beat of our hearts. Be with us in this time of worship, that our hearts and minds might be reformed and transformed by your Spirit. Amen. And now we are invited to share in passing the peace. Please greet your friends and neighbors with the peace of Christ. Thank you. Our worship continues with the reading of Scripture. Our first reading is from the prophet Habakkuk. He feels frustration with injustice, destruction, and violence, and gives voice to the turmoil the people are experiencing. Amid the anxiety of wondering if God will act, the prophet still calls the people to stand watch, offering hope for God's wisdom. If you'd like to read along, you can find the passage on page 871 in the Old Testament of the Pew Bible. The oracle that the prophet Habakkuk saw. O Lord, how long shall I cry for help, and you will not listen? Or cry to you, violence, and you will not save? Why do you make me see wrongdoing and look at trouble? Destruction and violence are before me. Strife and contention arise. So the law becomes slack, and justice never prevails. The wicked surround the righteous. Therefore judgment comes forth perverted. I will stand at my watchpost and station myself on the rampart. I will keep watch to see what he will say to me and what he will answer concerning my complaint. Then the Lord answered me and said, write the vision. Make it plain on tablets so that a runner may read it. For there is still a vision for the appointed time. It speaks of the end and does not lie. If it seems to tarry, wait for it. It will surely come. It will not delay. Look at the proud. Their spirit is not right in them, but the righteous live by their faithfulness. Our second reading is from the Gospel of Luke, chapter 19, verses 1 through 10, and can be found on page 82 of the New Testament in the Pew Bible. Jesus encounters Zacchaeus, a person of great riches and small stature, a person held in great disdain because he is a tax collector. Their meeting is memorable and transformational. Jesus entered Jericho and was passing through it. A man was there named Zacchaeus. He was a chief tax collector and was rich. He was trying to see who Jesus was, but on account of the crowd, he could not, because he was short in stature. So he ran ahead and climbed a sycamore tree to see him, because he was going to pass that way. When Jesus came to the place, he looked up and said to him, Zacchaeus, hurry and come down, for I must stay at your house today. So he hurried down and was happy to welcome him. All who saw it began to grumble and said, he has gone to be the guest of one who is a sinner. Zacchaeus stood there and said to the Lord, look, half of my possessions, Lord, I will give to the poor. And if I have defrauded anyone of anything, I will pay back 4 times as much. Then Jesus said to him, today salvation has come to this house, because he, too, who is a son of Abraham. For the Son of Man came to seek out and to save the lost. Here ends the reading of our sacred text. May the Spirit add to our understanding of God's holy word.
Let's be in prayer together. Loving God, thank you. Thank you for words of Holy Scripture. Thank you for beautiful music. Thank you for the words of praise, words of prayer. Thank you for your holy word spoken amongst us. Pray, God, that all these elements of worship, fueled by your Holy Spirit, might help to shape our hearts and minds, might begin to shape our very souls, that we become more and more every day the disciples that you've long called us to be. All of this we pray in Jesus' name. Amen. I want to do a few things. First, I want to give you the interpretation of Zacchaeus that I am used to and have preached on before. And then I want to give you a little different a spin on the Zacchaeus story, which is new to me. And then I want to end with a story that I hope brings it all together. I have tended to read the story. The story is humorous. We're sometimes not used to kind of a funny little story, but this is a funny little story about a little man, short of stature, but also not only short of stature, but held in low esteem. Because the Greek wording of that is not only that Zacchaeus may be short physically, but he was viewed as short, as low, as not of much consequence. But he was rich. He was a tax collector, and so he was the target of much hatred and derision from the Jewish community because he was a traitor. He was working with the Romans. He was skimming off the top to make himself wealthy, using probably unjust means to squeeze out the last penny from his neighbors. Not very well liked. Zacchaeus in Greek means the innocent one, the clean one. And so obviously this is just a bitter irony of Zacchaeus' life that he would have such a name as the innocent one, the clean one, when he was dirty. But this clean one is short in stature, knows that Jesus is coming, maybe being rich and wealthy, but having found that that's not enough, that there's something still missing from his life. And so he seeks to want to know who this Jesus is, to see him. But being short, he can't see over the crowd, and so he seeks, kind of looks around and finds that there's a tree down the way. Jesus seems to be headed that way, so he runs ahead of the crowd, climbs the tree. Of course, it's a sycamore tree, and being a kind of a comical story, the sycamore tree is filled with sap, and it's sticky, and it usually has lots of ants and bugs who love the sap of the sycamore tree, but kind of make it kind of a really messy and dirty tree. Again, this clean, this innocent one climbs this dirty tree to see Jesus. Jesus, the crowd finally gets to where Zacchaeus is, looks up in the tree and says, Zacchaeus, commands Zacchaeus, get down out of that tree. And right away says, I must be at your house today. I'm going to have a meal. You're going to be my host. Now, this is a great honor in the Near East, and people begin to grumble about Jesus eating with tax collectors and sinners. The idea was that if somebody was dirty or unclean, you became unclean if you had any interaction with them. So Jesus is supposed to be a holy person. He's supposed to be clean, unblemished. And so him interacting with this dirty Zacchaeus makes him, or endangers his cleanliness. And yet, when it comes to it, and when Zacchaeus hears the complaining of the crowd, he says, listen, if I have defrauded anyone, I will give back, 4 times what I owe. And I will give half of my goods to the poor. Kind of above and beyond. And Jesus claims Zacchaeus, claims him as being a son of Abraham, one of the chosen people, and says, that this is exactly the kind of thing that he has come to do. That's been the traditional understanding. So this person who's rich, wealthy, but senses that something is missing from his life, works hard, seeks to find Jesus, and as soon as he makes the effort to see Jesus, Jesus sees him, and the interaction between the two of them is transformative for Zacchaeus' life. He's brought back into community with his fellow Jews. He's brought back into relationship with God. That's been the way that I've understood the story. But this week it became understood to me that there's another way. There's an alternate reading to this text. We have understood this text because Zacchaeus is held in low esteem, because he is a tax collector. We have made assumptions about who he is and the way he lives his life. But it's interesting that the story continues just the way that I've told it. Zacchaeus climbs the tree. He comes down. He's all covered in sap and bugs and gross. But Jesus, honors him by saying, "I need to eat with you today." The difference between the two understandings is that when Zacchaeus talks about giving half of his belongings to the poor and about returning 4 times, if he's defrauded anyone, giving them 4 times what the amount that he's defrauded them. The way that Zacchaeus says it in the original Greek, it's not that he is changing his ways. The way that Zacchaeus says it is as if he has been doing this all along. The Greek is in the present tense, not the future. Not, I'm going to start giving half of my goods to the poor. I'm going to start giving 4 times what I've defrauded anybody. Zacchaeus makes a claim about the way that he has been living his life already. Now suddenly, having the name Zacchaeus is not a bitter irony, but it's the truth that nobody else is willing to see because of what Zacchaeus does for a living. Suddenly, Zacchaeus is an innocent person who's been doing his best to uphold the laws of Israel. But the crowd around him is not willing to give him that. They see him as that no good, lousy, short, little, puny tax collector that they love to hate. And the blessing that Jesus gives is something that was true all along. He is a son of Abraham. And the blessing that Jesus gives is not necessarily just to Zechariah, but to the whole community. Because they had been living with a delusion of who Zacchaeus was. But in fact, all along Zacchaeus was doing the work of God, fulfilling the law, and even going a step further. But it took Jesus' recognition of that to make everybody see. See what that does? Instead of it just being an individual's viewpoint, an individual making a transformation, now it is the community that needs to see the world differently. The community that needs to see the life of the people in the community differently. To know that the prejudgments we've had on closer inspection might turn out to be false. If you look in the bulletin, Jane Spalding, I have to give her credit because she passed this along to me after a conversation at the Wednesday noon lunch group. So it's a poem by Steve Garnis Holmes. It's just called Generosity. So Steve begins by translating the Greek literally as it is. So this is not like a new translation. This is how the Greek is translated. It's just that people have translated it in a certain way because they assume that the tax collector, Zacchaeus, is an unjust person, and so this must be a transformation that occurs when he sees Jesus. But the Greek actually just says, look, half of my possessions, Lord, I give to the poor. And if I have defrauded anyone of anything, I pay back 4 times as much. Now the poem. In the Greek, Zacchaeus doesn't say he will give, but that he does. Is this a sudden change, or has he done this all along? Either way, it's clear. Radical generosity is possible from a poor widow or a rich taxman. Whether it's a new move or an old habit. Whether it's hard or radical generosity is to be expected. The only thing holding you back is if you don't want to. If, as you suspect may be true of Zacchaeus, something needs to happen to you to make you want to, it already has. Your move. What does that mean at the end there? Something needs to happen to you to make you want to, it already has. Your move. Let me tell you the story. There's a story of a monastery. This is a long time ago, in the distant past. A monastery built up in a community had been going just fine for a generation. The monks were doing good work in the community. They had a blessed community amongst themselves. People would come and share in their worship, share in the produce that the brothers would bring forward and sell in the marketplace. It was a lively, productive community of faith. But as the years went by, there were a number of hardships. There were conflicts in the community. There were things going on in the wider world that left the monastery kind of broken and in disrepair. At the time of our story, there were now only 5 monks left, and the monastery is kind of run down. As happens in those kinds of situations, there was conflict between the monks. There was blame. There was pointing of fingers about why things had fallen apart the way that they had. But the abbot, one of the monks, abbot, and then 4 brothers, the abbot would often go on walks through the forest, trying to figure out and to pray about what could be done. In the forest, there was a hermitage. There was a hermit who lived there, who had dedicated his life to solitude and prayer and devotion, and he was known in the community as kind of a wise person. There were people, when conflicts happened between neighbors, they would often bring their concerns to the hermit in the woods. He was a neutral, he didn't have any, no dog and horse in the race kind of a thing. He could be a neutral view, and he was known to be wise and discerning. He would listen, he would offer advice, and usually the parties would go away kind of having their conflict resolved. And so the abbot decided, you know what, I'll seek out the hermit and see what this man might be able to offer. And so the abbot went to the hermitage and was welcomed by the hermit into his small and humble abode. And the abbot kind of poured out his heart and wept for the loss of this this monastery and the things that it had produced and the worship that had been raised in that sacred site. And the hermit wept with him. Could see the despair, could see the loss, could see the world around them, and what could be done. And so the abbot said, do you have any advice for us? What can we do? What might be done in order to bring this back? And the abbot, or the hermit, kind of said, I'm so sorry. I really don't know. I see the pain that you're in. I understand the conflict that's going on. I understand the needs of the monastery, but I really don't have anything to offer you, except I will say that I believe that one of you is the Messiah. And the abbot was just kind of taken aback. Say that again. One of you is the Messiah. And so the abbot left the hermitage, not with the advice that he had been seeking, but with this strange sense of, what could that possibly mean? The Messiah. One of you is the Messiah. I mean, one of you is the Lord, the second coming, Christ returned to the world to bring victory. And as he returns, he sees the sad, run-down monastery. How could it be? And yet we know that Christ was born in a humble stable. We know that he was born into a small, a people who were meaningless in the larger scale of the world. Maybe this is God doing this again. And what does this mean? So he went to the brothers. The 4 brothers assembled, anxious for news and advice. What could they do? And the only thing that the abbot can tell them is that one of you is the Messiah. The brothers were just, kind of distraught. Like, what could that possibly mean? But they continued. Monasteries and these religious orders are nothing if not consistent in the way the patterns of life, the patterns of prayer and of service and doing the things that need to be done around the monastery. And so they kind of went back to their work, but now they went back to their work and they experienced worship in a different way. Suddenly they noticed Brother Leonard and how he had this incredible voice. Is that the voice of the Messiah singing out to us? And Brother Samuel, who has such meaningful and moving prayers, his prayers that seem to warm your heart and make you think. Maybe that's the prayer of the Messiah. And out working in the field, knowing how one of the brothers was so diligent and hard at work in the gardens, and how he had such a green thumb. Maybe that's the Messiah who brings such life into the world. The more they began working with each other, the more they began to pray together, the more they began to continue to sing together and worship together, something happened. And when people would come into the monastery, they would sense that something is different, something has changed. There's a special life, a special value. The brothers seem to love each other so much that the brothers seem to listen to one another so deeply. They seem to care for one another with such compassion. It was compelling. They wanted to be a part of that community. They wanted to be a part of that worship. They wanted to be a part of what was going on there. And so they would begin to spread the word, and soon the village was worshiping again in the monastery, where there had only been a handful. Now there were overwhelming. And soon enough, young men began to step forward and say, I want to give my life to being a part of this community. They sensed within this community such wonder, such compassion and love that they wanted to be a part of it, were willing to give up everything and devote their lives to it. Over time, the monastery began to blossom again. Monastery began to grow, began to produce, began to be a part of the community around it. The good works and the good services and the worship and the praise that took place, it produced fruit for the whole community around it. Now, why did this story occur to me as I was reading this text? I think it has to do with that last question that we're asked in this poem. The only thing holding you back is if you don't want us to. What's holding us back? We know the texts, we know the songs. What's holding us back is a willingness to recognize the gifts that God has given to us. The gifts that God has given to me, that's given to you. If we will recognize that the Lord is present here, what an incredible difference that would make in the way that we treat one another, the way that we care for one another, the way that we bring the good news of God's love out into the world. But we have to recognize it, don't we? We have to see it in the faces of the people we worship with, the folks that we pass the peace with, the folks that we greet and shake their hands. And when we do, great things are possible. The Lord begins producing fruit here in our midst, fruits of compassion and justice, all these good things. It's a remarkable little poem. If, as you suspect may be true of Zacchaeus, something needs to happen to you to make you want to. It already has. Your move. Amen. Let's share together our next hymn. It's 551. Pass me not, O gentle Savior. South Korea. Many of you may have heard in the news it's over 153 people in a crowd that was gathered to celebrate Halloween. And there were hundreds of thousands of people gathered together out in the streets, and it seems that there was a crush of people, and it left 153 plus dead. So pray for those folks and all those injured and all those families who left without, looked like a crowd of a lot of young people. And are there other joys or concerns that we can share together this morning? Any joys or concerns to share? I'll lift up one. Just yesterday I did a service for a fellow named Dick Johnson. And Dick was married for 38 years to a former member of our congregation. She was Kate Coons when she was here. But she was here with her children 38, 40 years ago. One of the remarkable things, when she thought about a church, and when she thought about needing the services of a church, this was the church that she thought of. While she hadn't been a member here for 38 or 40 years, it came back to this community of faith. And so I was very glad to help the family, and very glad that Pat and Alan Cottrell could be there as well to bring comfort and just a measure of comfort to the family. But please lift up prayers for the Johnson family, the Coons family, and let's be together in a spirit of prayer. Loving God, thank you. Thank you for being present to us in all times and all places. When we celebrate, when we gather together to grieve, you are with us always. We come to this time of prayer with, as always, a mixture of emotions, things for which we are so grateful, and also things that weigh heavily upon our hearts and minds, heavy yokes upon our shoulders. And so we turn to you, God, with this mix of emotions. We bring our thanksgiving for the world that you have created, with thanksgiving for the people in our lives, family and friends. Thanks for the individual talents and abilities that you've given to each of us. So thankful for the world and the beautiful creation that you've made accessible to us. So thankful, God, simply for a new day, the next breath. Thankful, God, for all these things and so many more. But we also are so aware of anxieties and worries around us, people we love who are going through difficult times, families grieving, lost loved ones, individuals going through trials and hardships, folks who are facing such a mix of difficulty. But God, you are present to us. You lift us when we're down. You strengthen us when we are feeling like we can't go forward. Continue to be present to us. Bring your healing touch. Bring the light that can illuminate the darkness and show us a way forward. Bring to us a word of peace in violent times. Bring to us a word of compassion and love amidst a world that so often feels filled with hatred. In the silence of our sanctuary, God, we pray that you would hear us as we lift to you our silent prayers. Hear us, God, as we pray. Loving God, thank you for hearing us as we open our hearts and minds to you. Our prayers so immediate and so close to home are prayers that stretch out around the world. And now hear us as we lift the prayer that Jesus has taught us to pray, saying, Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our sins, as we forgive those who sin against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen. So at this time, we're going to set up the TV quick, or as quick as I can. And then we'll watch a stewardship message from Chris Frazier. Again, my thanks to Chris, of course, for doing that. Thanks to Brett for editing it all together, and to Craig for helping Chris put his thoughts into words for us this morning. Let's receive our morning's offering. Let us give as we are able according to the blessings which God has already given to us. Gracious and loving God, we thank you. We thank you for all of the gifts that we have received. We thank you for the opportunity to present them back, to give a portion to strengthen the ministry of our congregation, the ministry of our church, not only here among our church members, but in the community around us and in the wider world. We ask your blessing upon these gifts and upon each of us. Help us to be your disciples. In Jesus' name, amen. Let's close our worship by singing together. It's 397 in the black hymnal or New Century hymnal. Thank our God for sisters, brothers. Sanctifier, be among you and remain with you always. Go in peace. Amen.